For today's video, we have my power rankings for the women's physique Olympia. The popularity of this division just refuses to sizzle down. It feels like the talent pool grows every year, even long after Daniel and Bailey rode off into the sunset. I'm still perplexed more physique girls don't try their hand at the now lucrative female bodybuilding division. In fact, this is the only division where I couldn't settle on a single dark horse candidate, so I had to go with two. Ruiying Bian is her real name, but she goes by Olivia to make it easier for us non-Cantonese speakers. She's kind of a half wild card, half dark horse. Her conditioning seems to vary, but I imagine it's only a matter of time before she gets it down, hence the wild card label. The dark horse label comes from the fact that she won the Chicago Pro, but recently placed 5th at the Atlantic City Pro just a few weeks ago, and it'll be hard to turn that around in just a few weeks. She's this short, exuberant goofball that might just be the first Chinese national woman to compete at the Olympia. While this is her first one, I don't expect it to be her last. Ivie Rhein is more of a dark horse. She actually competed in the Olympia last year, but might have been a tad overlooked as she placed 15th. She narrowly lost the Omaha Pro earlier this year, but went on to win Tampa. In some ways, she kind of resembles Juliana Malakarn, but brings sharper conditioning that would have been punished back in her day. I imagine she is expected to place better than Olivia, so I don't really consider her a dark horse, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see her jump pretty high up into the top 10.
Number 10.
In 10th place, we have Jeannie Feldman. She's been competing a lot and will have done the 5 biggest shows once the Olympia is over this year, a gauntlet I haven't seen many pull off. She's one of the moms who somehow managed to multitask raising her kids into the equation as well. She has a pretty good physique overall. Her legs are a little behind her upper body, but I feel she still encompasses a pretty good flow to her physique despite that. It'll probably be a battle for her to hold off some of the others from the top 10, but her experience could be the difference maker here.
Number 9.
2020 gave birth to a few meteoric rises. This is one of them. In late August, Rachel Daniels wasn't even an IFBB pro, but she was qualified nationally. She competed in the Junior USAs, won her pro card, and then the overall in women's physique. Most people would find themselves content by that point, but not Rachel. The next weekend, she entered the New York Pro and won that. So she effectively went from being an MPC amateur to qualifying for the Olympia in the course of 9 days. She has some crazy separation in her legs and has a very pristine and fluid posing style. This is one where it's almost impossible to predict where she'll land, but is definitely one to watch.
Number 8.
It's been a tough year for Valentina Mishina, but luckily for her, she's got Russian resolve in her DNA. She had perhaps the most grueling schedule of anyone in bodybuilding the last few years, as she competed in roughly 13 consecutive shows. What's even more impressive is she did this without a prep coach. Hoping she could re-add the word fat to her vocabulary, she missed requalifying for the Olympia by 1 placing, so she went on to win the Romania Pro the next month. But since then, she hasn't been able to get back into that crisp conditioning that she was known for. This year, she placed 7th at the Arnold in Atlanta just a few weeks ago, so she's probably at a point where she's at this mental block and finally turned to a prep coach and hired Shelby Starnes. In normal circumstances, I would say this is a surefire combo, but consider that he wasn't given a full preparation, so it could go either way. I'd say she has one of the best shots of breaking into the top 5.
Number 7.
I'll refer to her as Pen, as I guarantee I'd butcher her name horribly. Her placing here probably isn't fair to her, as she hasn't competed in 2020 and barely missed the Olympia in 2019, probably due to complacency with her standing in the points. She qualified for this year by winning the 2019 Arizona Pro, which was an extremely competitive contest as it was 1 week before the Olympia, and she has actually beaten some of the really big names. It's really hard to predict where she will end up as it's been such a quiet year for her, but she is definitely a factor in this contest that people should keep in mind.
Number 6.
I made it very hard to crack the top 6 without having previously placed in it during an Olympia. Anne-Lorraine Mohn might have been the only one to have found a way. She kept placing very high in a bunch of shows last year, but wasn't able to secure a victory. She made the Olympia on points, but then didn't place. She then got some much needed rest and shocked a lot of people by placing 2nd at the Arnold and then winning the European Pro later. She's one of the taller competitors, so developing thickness in her legs is always going to be a challenge, yet she somehow managed to do just that between contests this season. Her willingness to compete has definitely paid off, as it seems she can bring razor-sharp conditioning pretty consistently now. She resides in France, so it isn't a sure thing she makes this Olympia, but if she does, the other competitors better bring their A game to keep her out of the top 5.
Number 5.
In 5th, we have Laura Pintado. To be honest, I didn't expect her to place this high looking at some of last year's pictures. She has pretty good separation, but appeared to lack some of the thickness compared to the other girls. It's when you look at the comparisons that she really stands out. She is short, but very broad and has a tiny waist. I think a hurdle every aspiring bodybuilder faces is how well their structure will show on stage, which tends to highlight their weak points. There are a lucky few, however, who look even better on stage, and Laura is in that camp. As for this Olympia, she looks even better than she did last year with increased size. I don't think last year's placing was a fluke either, and this is one very dangerous competitor to watch.
Number 4.
Many will probably disagree with this, as some will argue that she placed second at last year's Olympia, but the truth is Sarah Villegas hasn't won that many contests and her resume wasn't able to garner enough points. I was very adamant about making consistency count in the rankings. Everybody above her has won at least one Arnold Classic and placed top 3 at the Olympia. She was very close to hitting third as well. As for her physique, she has arguably the best legs in women's physique. It is pretty mind-boggling how low her hamstrings and glutes attach, as you can see in this picture, and her upper body isn't that far behind. It's definitely something to watch if she can replicate last year's conditioning, and if she places second again, it's fair to say that she's ranked that. But that would be a disappointment for her, as she set her goals for the top.
Number 3.
Perhaps the most underrated physique competitor in the division, Daniely Castilho has quietly placed very highly the last few years. Not much is known about her as she keeps a low profile in the Amazon region and South America, but she is ranked this high for a reason. She has won the Arnold Classic, the Toronto Pro, and placed top 4 in the Olympia twice. In fact, her record outside of the Olympia is perfect. She has kind of the Chris Cormier effect hindrance, where she doesn't necessarily have an eye-catching body part, but this is because she has almost perfect symmetry, balance, and proportions, and every year she gets a little bigger. People might not realize how closely she is to knocking on the door of the higher ranks.
Number 2.
In second, we have Natalia Coelho. Now, this is someone who is not scared to compete, and I wanted to reward that, but not enough to overcome the Olympia victory. So she was a very good way to test my system. Originally a figure competitor, she switched to physique in 2018 and hasn't looked back. In that time span, she has done 9 big shows and has only been beaten by 3 women. And that's after the fact that she's been punished for coming in too lean at times, a problem many competitors would love to have. Physiologically, her body seems to be able to shed more of its water weight than most people, but she also eats healthy year-round, so that may play a role. I believe she's the youngest competitor in this year's contest, and this will be her 5th appearance in it.
Number 1.
I know this one isn't a surprise to many. I feel that Shanique Grant is currently the most genetically gifted athlete in the IFBB. Even the gurus that thought they had seen it all have been shocked by her physique. I wouldn't be surprised if her leg circumference exceeded her waist size. But that doesn't mean she's unbeatable. I feel that women's physique has the highest standard of conditioning on the women's side. The only class that could challenge this would be figure, but the physique bar has risen so high the last couple of years that it's not a debate as to which is more challenging. The open women are definitely bigger, but if you watch the physique competitors that move up, you'll see that they hold their own by just sheer conditioning. What I'm getting at is that even with Shanique's extraterrestrial genetics, she needs to come in on point or she could be dethroned. And every year a new contender comes in out of nowhere. I remember watching the untouchable Ronnie Coleman the year Cutler dethroned him. It happens to all the greats, sometimes because of their age catching up to them, other times because of an injury, and at times even due to simple complacency. So there's my women's physique power rankings. It's kind of in a weird place at the moment. In a vacuum without Shanique, it would be an absolute dogfight every year, but she's been able to bring stability to a division that probably needs more of it, as the judging has seemed a bit muddled or wonky at times. And if Shanique doesn't manage to come in at least 90%, it could suddenly be the most exciting show of the event. And that's all I got for this one, so let me know your picks in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.